Today and next week, we talk about personal projects, things that mean something to us, to gain experience, to try out new things, and maybe to fix old mistakes and make some new ones. Hey everyone, Stephan here. I hope you're doing well. In Limitless, a book by Jim Kwik, he mentions a story about a power station which for some reason just ran out of power. Nothing works anymore, so they called a specialist. He comes in, he looks at this tableau with a million cables, takes out a screwdriver, turns one screw, and voila, everything works again. So the manager's super happy, goes to him like, "Oh, thank you so much. How much do we owe you?" Tech looks at him, $10,000. What? Manager, not happy, said, "There's no way you're gonna pay this. I want an itemized invoice." "No problem," says the tech, takes out his book, writes it down, gives it to the manager. Manager looks at it, turning one screw, $1. Knowing which screw to turn, $9,999. Now, doesn't that somehow sound familiar? As a photographer, we are so limited or misunderstood that we just push a button. Well, but it's important to know which buttons to push. So this is what we talk about today, personal projects, so that we can grow, so that we know which screw to turn, and to sometimes also reignite our passion. If we do things that we maybe don't like so much, but we just do it because we can, well, sometimes we have to reignite that fire. And sometimes we just want to try out things and in any way reduce the amount of risk when we go into a photo shoot where there are certain expectations. So because we've done it, we practiced it, and, well, we create a portfolio or a body of work that really represents who we are. So every day when I walk into the studio, I pass my little gallery, which photos we hang up, I don't know, when we moved in back 10 years ago, 9 years ago. This means that most photos are at least 10 years or older. Now, this one of the gorgeous Nay, back then she was, I think, 6 years old. So we must have shot this shy of 13 years ago. Nay is now turning 20 this year. And I've decided I want to recreate that photo that I walk past every single day, now 13 years later. Now, when I look at the old photo, there's a few small mistakes in it, which probably only a photographer can see. And I want to fix them. At the same time, I think it's just a cool idea to recreate as close as possible a photo that has been taken such a long time ago, both for me as a photographer, but also for Nay, who is in the photo as a 6-year-old and now as a nearly 20-year-old. So, when you look at the original photo, the camera actually grabbed focus on the parasol rather than her eyes. This is something I definitely want to get right this time. Anyway, long story short, I printed the original color version and off we go. First, we need a black background. Easy done. Now, back then, Nay was tiny, so she was sitting on the floor with those parasols just arranged behind her on the floor. But nowadays, that wouldn't work anymore, so I had to come up with a way somehow to fly those things. Now, I always try to prepare as much as I can before my subject comes on set. So, knowing her height, I set up my little dummy head as a stand-in. By the way, to create that little platform, I actually used the base of a smaller light stand, the Manfrotto 003 backlight stand, something like that. But you'll find it on B&H. Now, to be exact, I measured the height and then create kind of a backdrop stand. I use one of my favorite light stands, which is the Manfrotto 420B or 420B, which is a combi stand That means you can use it as a normal light stand, but you also can turn it into a boom stand, which comes in very handy. Now, if you use the boom arm before, you know that you always have to counterweight it. But instead, I decided I just turn the spigot around and use a second light stand to hold it in place, which works nicely. Now to those umbrellas, or actually, as I was lectured yesterday, they are meant to be called parasols. Well, what do I know? I'm Swiss after all. Anyway, I couldn't find the absolute same parasols as we used back then, but nearly identical ones, so I guess that will be just fine. Now to mount them. In theater, we have a saying, if it moves, gaff it, and if it doesn't move it, kick it, because you really want to gaff it. So my not quite so secret weapon of choice is gaffer tape. I must have spent $1 million on that stuff by now, but it does the trick. For the third parasol, I use a slimline light stand, so I can place it nicely and lift it over the boom and place it just where I want it. So, last check, I think that looks actually pretty close to the original. So next, it's time to light that baby. Looking at the original shot, it's lit from the left, and zooming in a little bit, have a look at those catch lights in her eyes. They were done with the square softbox. This is another flaw I want to correct this time. I prefer to create perfectly round catch lights. Eyes are so beautifully shaped. I try to avoid messing it up with the square softbox or with a square catch light in the eyes. So for this shoot, I decided to use my 1.2 meter Octabank, which creates a nice soft light, great for skin tones. And because of its size, it also produces those nice soft shadows. It's also a bit of a light grenade. Light really goes everywhere. So to control the spill, I use a grid. I'm actually a big fan of grids. I use them on everything pretty much. Now, the last thing to do is to measure the light so that I know that we're all set for Nay. As I've mentioned in the original photo, the eyes were not perfectly in focus. So to avoid it this time, I asked her to hold the parasol lower so I can lock in the focus and then she can hold it in place. One shot wonder! Yay! 2 hours in the making. Let's have a look. Yep, this time the eyes are indeed in focus, tack sharp, and with a beautiful round catch light. Love it. So let's have a look. This is the old one, and this is our new one. I think we nailed it. We're pretty close. So now that we got the old replicated, I felt, well, while I have Nay in the studio, let's create some new stuff and also up the ante a little bit. Now, when I design light shows for theaters, we always use the big boys' toys. But I always wondered, what can I do in the studio with some, I guess you would call them party or DJ lights? Actually, I thought about buying a fixed installation in my studio, for ambience or for some fun shoots, but the good ones are not that cheap. So for today, I just rented 3 of them to give it a spin and see what we can do. The idea is to create kind of like a club feel behind our subject while still maintaining her in crystal clear focus in the foreground. To light her, I decided I want a little bit more of a punchy look. So I set up a beauty dish, and as I mentioned, I love my grids, so I use a grid for my beauty dish as well. So now, it's time to play. These lights run through DMX, which means I can control the output and the color from my controller. Fancy stuff. And yes, I admit I'll forever be a little boy who loves to play with his toys. Anyway, so here's Nay in her funky leather jacket. Let's start with a nice punchy red. Add some smoke. You can never have enough smoke. And important, you have to have a fan blowing in front of her to keep the smoke behind her. As soon as the smoke comes in front of her, you just get a milky kind of mess. And here's the result. Doesn't she just look stunning? I love it. So now we have the photos with the red, I guess more alluring kind of shots. I thought, let's turn the lights blue and create a movie poster kind of look. Now, in real life, Nay is the most gentle, loving person. But I wanted to push her a bit and create more of a gorgeous but deadly assassin look. And this is the result. Well, there you go. I hope you enjoyed a little look behind the scenes and watching us create those images. Now, it doesn't matter what kind of personal projects you do. The important thing is that you do. I think we need that experience so that if we are in a situation where, well, all the power goes out, we need to know which screw to turn. At the same time, we can create what makes us happy. And because it's on our own terms, well, it doesn't matter if we mess up. Now, if you're already sensationally good at something, well, you might want to extend your horizon, try out new techniques, or maybe something funky, like a deadly assassin or something. Anyway, I hope you go out, create something awesome, and I'll see you again next Friday.